First of all, we got to go home real quick. Congratulations to Udonis Haslem for getting his number 40 retired in Miami. And so what that's done is that's made me kind of reflect on Udonis's career. And I realized something about Udonis Haslem. Udonis Haslem is one of those players who really separates who really knows basketball and who doesn't. And it's been pretty interesting. It's been pretty interesting to watch, man. Like, I feel like in the culture of just kind of getting NBA jokes off, I feel like a lot of people just genuinely don't know who Udonis Haslem was as a player.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of just comes from, look, if you're like making the point that Udonis Haslem only averaged such and such amount of points, you've missed every point about who Udonis Haslem was. I think defense has to be paid a little more attention to. And I feel like as much as, let's say, for example, the 06 finals, as much as Dwayne Wade was incredible and he deserves all the credit he gets, if Udonis Haslem allows that to be a shootout between Dwayne Wade and Dirk Nowitzki, the Heat still lose that series. And so that's who Udonis Haslem was. Udonis Haslem was the ultimate, I don't even want to say utility guy, because he was more than that. He'd also score when you needed him to. But he for sure took on the defensive challenges. He for sure was switching as a four before people were. He was an undersized four in a time where you're playing against like real bruisers out there. And Udonis Haslem is 6'8", skinny, and taking on a challenge every night and winning that challenge. The Heat lose a lot of games without Udonis Haslem. And like LeBron and Bosh didn't take less money just because Udonis Haslem was Dwayne Wade's friend.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Udonis Haslem was a real contributor out there. And another thing that's been pretty funny to me is he's been really pissing people off with the stuff he says on his podcast. But it's an interesting thing to me because different places have different cultures, right?
Right.
And not only am I familiar with where Udonis Haslem is from, I'm from the same neighborhood as Udonis Haslem. And so from my perspective, it's not it's really all of inner city Miami, but I can only speak of the neighborhood I grew up in. What you're not gonna do is dance around what you have to say. Right. That's not respected by anybody. So you're either gonna say exactly what's on your mind, or you're just not gonna say anything. And so just seeing people kind of flip out at a 40-something-year-old man from Liberty City for like not pulling punches, I just feel like that's a gigantic waste of time. Like it's just not.
You said it in a lot nicer way than I would have. Shit, he doesn't give a fuck when nobody says like no hair on the tongue. Like,
but you know what?
That's Miami.
I noticed that when I moved to Dallas too, and that's no disrespect to Dallas. I love it up here, but sometimes I'll just be having what I think is a regular conversation. People be taken aback about how straightforward I was. And it's just like, all right, well, maybe this is just an actual thing. But I want to really just get y'all thoughts on Udonis Haslem, because I feel like he's become a purposefully misunderstood player.
No, absolutely. You mentioned his playoff success. He has 3 championships. He was a role player on all of them. Averaged 30 minutes a game the first ring, second ring 20 minutes a game in the playoffs, 16 in the last one. He played on those championship teams. Mm-hmm. He earned those rings. When you talk about the 06, the main defender on Dirk, gave him a lot of fits, gave him a lot of trouble, gave him hard fouls, gave him a lot of versatility. He wasn't the only guy, but he was the primary guy in the starting lineup. He got a lot of minutes on James Posey got a lot of minutes on him. Antoine Walker got some run on him. Even Zoe got a couple of looks at him too, and they threw GP Gary Payton at him too. But Udonis was the guy from tip off, ready to go in Dirk's face, make it difficult, set the tone, be physical. And there's a very good argument that he was the second or third best player on that championship team. It wasn't Shaq in the finals.
That's what people forget. Shaq was, and all due respect to Shaq, he was so bad that series.
Yeah. He got. They were still. I mean, it was still Avery Johnson's fault for double teaming him for some reason. I'll never understand that. But yeah, Shaq averaged like 11 points in the finals. Antoine Walker averaged more points than him.
Yeah.
Udonis outplayed him too. And he just physicality, just brought that energy, brought that intensity, the ultimate respect from all his teammates. He was one of the only guys that you would never question really his shot selection. He would move the ball, move without the ball, set screens, crash the boards, be undersized like you were, play the five, come off the bench. When he drafted Michael Beasley, he's like, hey, we're going to go as far as the young guys take us. Mm-hmm. I'll come off the bench. I'll take a step back and do that. And he's always been about winning. I know the last, he really essentially retired in 2014, 2015. After that, he was more of a just bench guy, locker room guy. But for his playing career, I'm sorry. If you just started watching basketball in 2018, yeah, Udonis Haslem is only a locker room guy. But no, the guy had a legitimate NBA career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even as just a locker room guy, a lot of players came to his defense, veteran players, talking about how, as a veteran in a locker room, how much that is needed across the league, in a league that's trending towards so many young players. Bams talked about it like he wouldn't be nobody without, as he's referred to down here in Miami, OG. Yeah. And one of the most unselfish human beings, wherever he's been, took so many pay cuts. Dallas knew how good he was. They tried to poach him from Miami the year, in 2010, offering him, I believe it was 4 years for $30 million. Miami gave him 4 for 20. So he left 10 mil on the table. That was just one of the times. Staying loyal, literally, to his people, to who he is as a person. To Kenny's point, the way he said it so eloquently, but he just does not care what people say or think about him. And I respect that. That's literally the culture that, grew up in Miami. So it is what it is. And he was automatic from 15.
No question.
Especially on the baseline. Oh my goodness.
That left short corner.
Yeah. Then he started in an era where spacing wasn't really viewed as, to the 3-point line. He was spacing for that era out to that midi, 15, 17, 18 feet. That was considered spacing. One of the best heady defenders, heart, hustle, every game, drawing charges, led the league several times. I know he's the all-time Heat leader in charges as well. Like, just the ultimate competitor, earned his respect from his peers. It was earned, not given. There's a reason why players tout him for not just for the player, for the person, for the teammate, for everything he has been to the organization. And even Dwayne said it. He wouldn't be who he is without UD either. So like, he was the guy that he would make sure Wade came out undusted because he knew they needed him. So he would take all the brawls for D Wade. He'd take all the hits. He'd take all the punches. As Kenny was saying, nowadays he's built like a 4 nowadays. Like the 6'8", he was for like 215, 220. He started getting a little bigger towards the end of his career. He was still undersized. So it was just a lot of heart, hustle, passion, shit that people don't really have these days. Came out undrafted, obviously out of Florida, and just was basically, as far as I believe the story goes, it's just that he didn't want to work out for anybody. It was like Miami or overseas, and he was about to go overseas. Miami called him in for a training camp, came in same year as D Wade did, and shit. Basically, had the career he had. He's having his retirement on January 19th, so he's gonna get his just due. Rightfully deserved. One of the all-time pro players. And
to the point of the later stage of his career and the role he played, I feel like even that kind of that gets very misunderstood. Also, another thing is, like, if you're saying Udonis Haslem if you're reducing him to like quote unquote bench warmer, you also don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Absolutely.
Because what happens is, first of all, a team paying a player every year about 6 years after he stops playing, whether you agree or not with whether that should be the case, the organization obviously finds a clear use for that. It's not, Pat Riley isn't doing anybody any favors just because he wants to do him a favor.
Right.
They're obviously important. And to speak on the importance of that role Udonis Haslem had in that process, we're watching every year the Heat bring in undrafted players and make these deep playoff runs. Udonis Haslem was not the first one, but he was the first one who came into the Heat undrafted, earned his spot, and went all the way to a championship. And like we mentioned a few minutes ago, really contributed to those championships.
Yep.
And so having him in that locker room and in those practices, like with a practice jersey on, not trying to coach, and from that perspective was a little different, with a practice jersey on, telling a Max Strus, a Gabe Vincent, or the list goes on and on about
Duncan,
Caleb Martin. The list just goes on and on about undrafted Heat players who came in and made real contributions. And Udonis Haslem was that hands-on, day-to-day example. And so that's what Udonis Haslem meant after his playing career. But I also feel like a lot of people were just too young to remember how good of a player he was.
No, and you know, Lou was talking about the respect around the league. We didn't even talk about the bubble when they were thinking about canceling it. It was, and they had the player meeting with all the players the teams that were in the bubble. It was Udonis and LeBron were the two voices that everybody was listening to.
Yeah.
And Udonis was the one who was like, "Yo, are we bullshitting? Are we gonna play? if we're not gonna play, let's go home. All right, let's stop fucking around. Let's be about it. Like, what are we doing? What's the real message?" And everybody was listening to him. And this was in 2020. This was about 4 years after he had legitimately stopped playing consecutive games or like in a significant role on the team, and people still respected him because his peers respected him. You talk about multiple times you've heard his name called out from other teams that were like, "Hey man, I just feel like we need a Udonis Haslem type. We need a vet. We need a real OG in the locker room to really get the respect of all the young fellas in here." There's a lot of teams that do way too much in one direction and don't respect what the Udonis Haslems, what the Garrett Temples, got vets like that who've been around the league, have a ton of respect, and work hard and can set an example for your organization.
So here's what I can say about that Udonis Haslem role, and this will really make it all make sense. So Andre Iguodala comes from he went from Golden State to Memphis. That didn't work. And then he comes to Miami. He played significant minutes, you know what I mean? And great defensive minutes, not great offensive minutes, but he played significant minutes in Miami. And then he goes back to Golden State after being with Udonis Haslem for a couple years. And what role is he playing in Golden State that time? Not playing minutes, but in the locker room as that presence, giving that advice to young players. And so, look, you can say what you want at the end of the day about Udonis Haslem but I pretty much guarantee that if it's negative, and it's not even us being biased, like if you have negative opinions about Udonis Haslem, they're probably incorrect.